The gunshot cracked through the morning air like thunder, jerking Nora Sullivan from her fitful sleep. She bolted upright in the stagecoach, her heart pounding against her ribs as violently as the horse's hooves against the hard, packed earth. Outside, men shouted. Another shot. The coach lurched to a stop, throwing her against the opposite seat, Montana Territory, 1876. This wasn't how Nora had imagined her journey west would begin. "Everyone out," a gruff voice commanded. "Hands where I can see 'em." Nora gathered her skirts with trembling hands and peered out the window. 3 men on horseback, bandanas pulled up over their faces, pistols drawn. The driver sat with his hands raised, fear etched into the lines of his weathered face. "Miss, you too." One of the men rode closer, training his gun on the coach door. Nora stepped out, her boots landing in the dust of the trail. The mountain air was cool against her face, a stark contrast to the heat of fear coursing through her veins. The other passengers, a silver-haired gentleman and a young mother clutching her infant, stood with their backs to the coach. "Valuables in the bag," the tallest robber instructed, tossing a canvas sack toward them. "Watches, money, jewelry, all of it." Nora's fingers moved to the gold locket at her throat, her mother's, the only piece of home she had left. She hesitated. "The necklace too, pretty lady," the bandit said, his eyes narrowing. "Don't make me ask twice." Her fingers fumbled with the clasp when a new sound cut through the tension, steady hoofbeats approaching from the ridge above. All eyes turned. A lone rider appeared against the rising sun, silhouetted on the crest of the hill. He sat tall in the saddle, shoulders squared, a rifle resting across his lap. Even from this distance, Nora could see the determination in his posture. "Might want to reconsider what you're doing, boys," the stranger called out, his voice carrying across the distance with surprising clarity. The leader of the bandits spat into the dirt. "Ride on, mister. This ain't your business. Made it my business when you pointed guns at ladies and children." The rider nudged his horse forward, descending the slope with unhurried confidence. As he drew closer, Nora could make out his features' strong jaw darkened with several days' stubble, eyes the color of a storm-tossed sky, and a mouth set in a grim line. 3 against 1, the bandit countered. "Those ain't odds I'd bet on." The stranger's horse continued its steady approach. "I've faced worse." Something in his tone made the bandits exchange glances. The leader's horse shifted nervously beneath him. "Last chance," the stranger said, now close enough that Nora could see the sun-weathered creases around his eyes. "Ride away, or I start shooting, I won't miss." Seconds stretched like hours. Nora barely breathed. Then, with a curse, the leader yanked his horse around. "This ain't worth dying over. Let's go, boys." The bandits galloped away, dust billowing behind them. Only when they disappeared around a bend did the stranger lower his rifle and approach the stagecoach. "Everyone all right?" he asked, his gaze sweeping over the passengers before settling on Nora. "Yes, thanks to you," the driver answered, climbing down from his perch. "Don't know what would have happened if you hadn't shown up when you did, mister." The stranger dismounted in one fluid motion. Up close, Nora could see that his clothes, while dusty from the trail, were of good quality. His boots were well worn but cared for, and the gun belt at his hip looked like it had seen its share of use. "Name's Dawson Reed," he said, removing his hat and revealing hair the color of wheat in autumn. "Was heading to Silver Creek when I heard the commotion." "That's where we're bound," the driver said. "Had a broken wheel yesterday, put us behind schedule. Reckon those fellas knew we'd be passing through this stretch of road at dawn." Dawson nodded. "It's getting worse. They've been hitting stages all through this territory." His eyes found Nora's again, and something passed between them, a current, quick and unexpected. She straightened her shoulders and extended her hand. "Nora Sullivan, I'm most grateful for your intervention, Mr. Reed." His hand enveloped hers, calloused and warm. "Just Dawson, madam." "You continuing to Silver Creek?" the driver asked, already checking the harnesses on his team. Dawson released Nora's hand and nodded. "I am. Might be wise if you rode alongside us, at least until we're through Blackwood Pass. It's a hard road, especially with bandits about." "I was planning to take the North Trail," Dawson said. "Easier terrain, less chance of an ambush." "The North Trail?" The driver shook his head. Adds half a day to the journey, Nora found her voice. Please, Mr. Reed Dawson, if it's not too much trouble, we'd welcome your company. Something flickered in his eyes. He glanced at the road ahead, then back at her. All right, he said finally. I'll ride with you. As they resumed their journey, Nora couldn't help but notice how Dawson positioned himself between the stagecoach and the dense woods along the trail, his eyes constantly scanning the surroundings. He'd chosen the harder road, despite having an easier option, and she wondered what kind of man would do such a thing for strangers. Little did she know that this choice would change both their lives forever. The stagecoach jostled over the rough terrain, each bump sending vibrations through Nora's body. Through the window, she watched Dawson Reed riding alongside them, his posture relaxed but vigilant. The morning sun cast his profile in sharp relief against the backdrop of pine-covered mountains. Quite the hero, isn't he? The silver-haired gentleman who had introduced himself as Judge Emmett Wilson smiled knowingly at Nora. She felt heat rise to her cheeks and turned her attention to the handkerchief she was embroidering. We're fortunate he happened along when he did, she replied diplomatically. The young mother, Sarah, adjusted her sleeping infant. My husband's waiting in Silver Creek. He'd be beside himself if anything happened to us. She paused. Are you meeting someone there, Miss Sullivan? Nora's needle stilled. No, I'm to be the new schoolteacher. Judge Wilson raised his eyebrows. All by yourself. That's quite an undertaking for a young woman. I'm 24, Judge Wilson, hardly a child. Nora resumed her stitching, her movements precise and deliberate. And I've been teaching in Boston for 6 years. The children of Silver Creek deserve education as much as any others. Of course, the judge backpedaled. It's just that the West can be unforgiving to those unprepared for its challenges. The stagecoach slowed as they approached a steep incline. Outside, Dawson dismounted and walked alongside the struggling horses, occasionally placing a hand on the lead animal's flank, murmuring encouragement. He knows horses, Judge Wilson observed. Moves like a man who spent his life in the saddle. Nora found herself wondering about Dawson Reed. What brought a man like him to this remote corner of the territory? He carried himself with the confidence of someone accustomed to danger, yet there was a gentleness in how he handled his horse, in how he'd spoken to the frightened passengers. At the top of the hill, the driver called a brief halt to rest the team. Nora stepped down from the coach, grateful for the chance to stretch her legs. The mountain air was crisp and clean, scented with pine and wildflowers. Below them, the valley stretched out in a patchwork of greens and golds, with a silver ribbon of river winding through it. Beautiful country, Dawson said, appearing beside her. He offered a canteen. Water, thank you. Their fingers brushed as she accepted it. Have you been in Montana long? Few years. He gazed out at the landscape. Came out after the war, needed open spaces after that. You fought in the war, a shadow crossed his face. Union cavalry seemed like a lifetime ago now. Nora took a sip of water, studying him over the rim of the canteen. He couldn't be much older than 30, which meant he'd been little more than a boy when the war began. She wondered what horrors those storm-gray eyes had witnessed. And now, what brings you to Silver Creek? A half-smile tugged at his mouth. Curious, aren't you, Miss Sullivan? Observant, she corrected. It's an occupational necessity for teachers, he chuckled, a low, pleasant sound. Fair enough, I'm looking for work. Heard the Double R Ranch is hiring experienced hands. The Richardson place, Judge Wilson joined their conversation. Robert Richardson runs the largest cattle operation in the county. Good man, fair employer from what I hear. Dawson nodded. That's my hope. The driver called for everyone to reboard. As Dawson helped Nora back into the coach, his hand steady at her elbow, she noticed a scar across his knuckles. Battle wound, she asked quietly, surprise flickered in his eyes. No, madam, barbed wire, hazard of the profession. As the journey resumed, Nora found her thoughts repeatedly returning to their enigmatic escort. There was more to Dawson Reed than he let on, she was certain of it. The stagecoach rolled on through increasingly difficult terrain. The road narrowed as it wound through a mountain pass, sheer rock face on one side, a steep drop on the other. Dawson rode ahead now, scouting the path. Twice he signaled for the coach to halt while he investigated something that caught his attention. "Man's cautious," the driver commented. Good quality in these parts. By mid-afternoon, dark clouds had gathered above the mountains. The air grew heavy with the promise of rain. "Blackwood Pass is just ahead," the driver announced. "Worst stretch of the journey. If we're going to hit trouble, it'll be there." As if on cue, Dawson rode back to the coach. "Storm's coming," he said, "and I don't like the look of the pass. Fresh tracks heading in, none coming out." "You think it's an ambush?" the driver asked, lowering his voice so the passengers wouldn't hear, but Nora was listening intently. Her hands tightened around her reticule. "Could be," Dawson replied, "or could be nothing. Either way, we should be prepared." The driver nodded grimly. "What do you suggest?" Dawson considered for a moment. "There's an old trapper's cabin about a mile back. We passed it earlier. Might be best to wait out the storm there, give me time to scout the pass properly. We're already behind schedule." "Better late than dead," Dawson said flatly. The driver conceded with a sigh. "All right, you lead the way." When informed of the change in plans, Judge Wilson grumbled about the delay, but Sarah looked relieved. The baby had grown fussy with the increasingly rough ride. The cabin was little more than a shack, a single room with a stone fireplace, dusty windows, and a roof that looked questionable at best. But it was shelter, and as the first fat raindrops began to fall, Nora was grateful for it. Inside, Dawson quickly assessed the space. "Roof's got some holes, but it'll keep off the worst of the rain. There's dry wood stacked by the fireplace." He turned to the driver. "Help me bring the horses around back. There's a lean-to that should give them some protection." As the men tended to the animals, Nora took charge inside. She swept the floor with a broken broom she found in the corner, cleared cobwebs from the windows, and arranged their provisions on a rickety table. "You're quite resourceful, Miss Sullivan," Judge Wilson remarked, watching from his seat on a wooden crate. "Necessity breeds adaptation, Judge," she replied. "Would you mind helping Sarah get a fire started? I'll see if there's anything we can use to make this place more comfortable." By the time Dawson and the driver returned, soaked from the downpour, Nora had transformed the cabin into something approaching habitable. A cheerful fire crackled in the hearth, their food was laid out for a simple meal, and she'd fashioned makeshift beds from their travel blankets. "Impressive," Dawson said, surveying her work. Water dripped from his hat and coat as he hung them by the fire to dry. "It seems you're not the only one with useful skills, Mr. Reed," she replied with a small smile. They ate a cold supper of bread, cheese, and dried beef, sharing stories to pass the time as the storm raged outside. Judge Wilson regaled them with tales from his courtroom days, while Sarah spoke of her journey west to join her husband, a doctor who'd established a practice in Silver Creek. "And you, Mr. Reed?" Sarah asked. "Any family waiting for you somewhere?" A brief silence fell. Dawson stared into his tin cup of coffee. "No, madam, no family." Something in his tone made Nora look up. There was a guardedness in his expression that hadn't been there before. "Well, I hope you find Silver Creek to your liking," Sarah continued, oblivious to his discomfort. "It's a growing town. My husband writes that they're building a proper church now, and there's talk of a railroad connection within the year." "Is that so?" Dawson seemed relieved by the change of subject. "Good for business, I imagine." "Indeed," Judge Wilson said. "I'm heading there to oversee some legal matters regarding the railroad negotiations, quite the opportunity for the region." As night fell and the others settled into sleep, Nora found herself unable to rest. The storm had intensified, wind howling through the cracks in the walls, rain drumming on the roof. She wrapped a blanket around her shoulders and moved to sit by the fire, where Dawson kept watch. "You should sleep," he said without looking up from the knife he was sharpening. "Tomorrow will be a long day. I've never been able to sleep through storms." She pulled the blanket tighter. "My father used to say I had weather in my bones." Dawson set the knife aside. "Your father, is he still in Boston?" Nora stared into the flames. "No, he and my mother both passed 3 years ago, influenza." "I'm sorry." "Thank you." She managed a small smile. It's why I decided to come west. Too many memories in Boston. I needed something new. Dawson nodded, understanding in his eyes. The West is good for new beginnings. Is that what you found? A new beginning? He was quiet for so long that Nora thought he might not answer. Then, I'm still looking, I suppose. Outside, lightning flashed, illuminating the cabin in stark white light. Thunder followed immediately, a deafening crack that made Nora jump. Dawson's hand moved instinctively to his gun, then relaxed. Just the storm, he said, more to himself than to her. The war still follows you, doesn't it? She asked softly, his eyes, reflecting the firelight, met hers. Some things you don't leave behind. I didn't mean to pry. You didn't, he added a log to the fire. It's easy to talk to you, Miss Sullivan, maybe too easy. She smiled at that. My students say the same thing just before they confess to some mischief. That drew a laugh from him, a genuine one that transformed his face. I can see why you're a good teacher. And I can see why those bandits thought twice about challenging you, she replied. There's a strength about you, Mr. Reed. A certainty, Dawson, he reminded her. And I'm not certain about much these days, except that sitting here talking with you is the most peace I've had in a long while. The honesty of his words caught her off guard. Heat rose to her cheeks and not from the fire. I should try to sleep, she said, suddenly aware of how alone they were in this corner of the cabin, how intimate their conversation had become. He nodded, understanding in his eyes. Good night, Miss Sullivan. Nora, she said, rising to her feet. If I'm to call you Dawson, then you must call me Nora. Good night, Nora, he amended, the sound of her name on his lips sending an unexpected warmth through her. Good night, Dawson. As she settled onto her makeshift bed, Nora realized that for the first time since leaving Boston, she felt something other than uncertainty about her decision to come west. Whatever dangers lay ahead on the road to Silver Creek, she was glad that Dawson Reed had chosen to walk it with them. Dawn broke clear and cold after the storm. Puddles dotted the muddy ground outside the cabin, reflecting a sky washed clean of clouds. While the others prepared for departure, Dawson saddled his horse and rode ahead to scout Blackwood Pass. You think the bandits will still be there? Nora asked the driver as they loaded the stagecoach. Hard to say, miss. That storm might have sent them seeking better shelter, but they're a persistent bunch. He secured the last of their belongings. Mr. Reed knows what he's about, though. If there's trouble, he'll spot it. An hour later, Dawson returned, his expression grim. Signs of a camp about halfway through the pass. Fresh, too. They waited out the storm and are likely expecting us to come through this morning. What do we do? Sarah clutched her baby tighter. There's a game trail that branches off just before the pass, Dawson said. It's rough going, not made for a coach, but it connects back to the main road on the other side. If we can get through without breaking an axle, we'll bypass them entirely. The driver scratched his beard. That's asking a lot of this old coach. Less than asking these folks to face those bandits again, Dawson countered. Judge Wilson cleared his throat. I must get to Silver Creek by tomorrow. The railroad representatives won't wait. You'll get there, Judge, Dawson assured him. But we do this carefully, or not at all. The game trail proved to be every bit as challenging as Dawson had warned. The stagecoach lurched and swayed over rocks and roots, its wheels sinking into mud left by the storm. Twice they had to stop to clear fallen branches. The passengers walked alongside during the steepest sections, reducing the weight the straining horses had to pull. Nora's boots and the hem of her dress were soon caked with mud, but she didn't complain. Dawson rode back and forth along their small procession, sometimes dismounting to help guide the horses through particularly difficult stretches. His calm competence was reassuring. You're quite comfortable in these wilds, she observed during one such moment, as they waited for the driver to navigate a tricky bend. Dawson offered a hand to help her over a fallen log. Spent time with the Shoshone after the war. They taught me how to read the land, move through it without leaving much trace. The Shoshone, how did that come about? A shadow passed over his face. Long story, not all of it pleasant. Before she could ask more, a shout came from ahead. The coach had become stuck, its rear wheel sunk deep in a mud hole. Everyone push, the driver called. They gathered around the coach Dawson, Judge Wilson, Nora, and even Sarah, who had secured her baby in a sling across her chest. On the driver's count, they heaved against the back of the vehicle. The wheels spun, flinging mud, but the coach didn't budge. Again, the driver urged. Nora's muscles burned with the effort. Her feet slipped in the mud, and she would have fallen if not for Dawson's steadying hand at her back. "One more try," he said. "All together now." With a final, collective grunt of effort, they felt the coach lurch forward. The wheel pulled free from the sucking mud with a wet pop. "We did it," Sarah exclaimed, breathless but smiling. Dawson helped Nora wipe the worst of the mud from her hands. "You're stronger than you look, schoolteacher." "As are you, Cowboy," she replied, noticing how he'd positioned himself to bear the brunt of the effort, his eyes crinkled at the corners. "Not a cowboy yet, have to get the job first. Something tells me you will." The trail grew easier as they continued, eventually widening into something more resembling a proper road. By mid-afternoon, they rejoined the main trail, well past the danger point of Blackwood Pass. "We made it," the driver announced with relief. "Should reach Silver Creek by nightfall, assuming no more delays." The mood in the stagecoach lifted considerably. Judge Wilson discussed his expectations for the town's growth, while Sarah spoke excitedly of reuniting with her husband. Nora found herself watching Dawson through the window, wondering what awaited him in Silver Creek and what it might mean for the unexpected connection forming between them. As the landscape changed from dense forest to rolling hills dotted with homesteads, signs of civilization became more frequent. They passed a cattle drive, the cowhands raising their hats in greeting. Smoke rose from distant chimneys. A stagecoach heading in the opposite direction rattled past them, its passengers peering curiously at their mud-splattered condition. "Almost there," the driver called back to them as they crested a final hill. Below, nestled in a broad valley with a river curving along its edge, lay Silver Creek. From this distance, it looked almost picturesque, a main street lined with wooden buildings, a church steeple rising above the rest, outlying farms and ranches spread across the surrounding plains. The setting sun gilded everything in warm, golden light. Nora felt a flutter of nervousness. This would be her home now, these people her neighbors, and the children her responsibility. She smoothed her travel-wrinkled dress, wishing she could arrive looking less like someone who'd spent the day pushing a stagecoach through mud. As if reading her thoughts, Sarah reached across to pat her hand. "Don't worry. Everyone understands how difficult the journey can be. No one will think less of you for looking like you've actually traveled." The stagecoach rolled down the hill and onto the main street of Silver Creek just as the church bell was tolling 6 o'clock. Despite the hour, the town hummed with activity. Men gathered on the porch of what appeared to be a saloon, while women with market baskets chatted outside the general store. Children chased each other in the dusty street, dodging around horses and wagons. They pulled to a stop in front of a 2-story building with a sign proclaiming it the Silver Creek Hotel. A small crowd had already gathered, waiting for the stage's arrival. Sarah. A man in a neatly pressed suit pushed through the onlookers, his face alight with joy. Sarah thrust open the coach door before it had fully stopped, practically tumbling into his waiting arms, their baby squeezed between them. "David," she sobbed, covering his face with kisses. "Oh, how I've missed you." Judge Wilson exited next, greeted by a committee of serious-looking men who immediately began discussing business. The driver started unloading luggage, calling out names of recipients for various parcels and mail bags. Nora hesitated at the door, suddenly overwhelmed. This moment stepping onto the soil of her new home felt momentous in a way she hadn't anticipated. A familiar figure appeared beside the coach. Dawson looked up at her, understanding in his eyes. Without a word, he extended his hand. She placed her fingers in his and descended from the coach. The ground felt solid beneath her feet, reassuring. "Miss Sullivan," a woman approximately Nora's age approached, her smile welcoming. "I'm Elizabeth Cooper, chairwoman of the school board. We're so pleased you've arrived safely." "Thank you, Mrs. Cooper. I'm eager to begin my duties." "It's Miss Cooper, actually," the woman corrected kindly. and there will be time enough for duties tomorrow. Tonight, you need rest and a hot meal. I've arranged a room for you at the hotel until the schoolhouse living quarters are ready." As Elizabeth led her toward the hotel, Nora glanced back at Dawson. He stood beside his horse, watching her go. Their eyes met, and he touched the brim of his hat in silent farewell. A surprising pang of loss swept through her. After all they'd shared on the journey, the danger, the storm, the conversations by firelight, it seemed wrong to simply part ways with no acknowledgement of what had passed between them. But what exactly had passed between them? A connection, certainly, understanding. Perhaps the beginnings of something more. Or perhaps it was merely the forced intimacy of travelers sharing hardship, something that would fade like morning mist once they returned to their separate lives. As she followed Elizabeth into the hotel, Nora wondered if she would see Dawson Reed again and what it might mean if she did. The Silver Creek Hotel was modest but clean, its lobby furnished with well-worn but polished furniture. A painting of mountain scenery hung above a stone fireplace, and a rack of local newspapers stood near the front desk. The air smelled of pine soap and coffee. "Mr. Jenkins," Elizabeth called to the balding man behind the desk. "This is Miss Sullivan, our new schoolteacher." Jenkins beamed. "Welcome to Silver Creek, Miss Sullivan. We've prepared our best room for you. Second floor, end of the hall, catches the morning sun beautifully." "That's very kind," Nora replied, suddenly aware of how exhausted she was. The day's exertions, combined with the emotional strain of arrival, had drained her completely. "There's hot water for bathing," Jenkins continued, handing her a key, "and the dining room serves until 8 o'clock. Elizabeth touched Nora's arm. "Get settled in, rest. I'll come by tomorrow morning to show you around town and introduce you to some of the families whose children you'll be teaching." Alone in her room, Nora sank onto the edge of the bed. It was simply furnished a dresser with a mirror, a washstand, a small writing desk by the window, but after days of travel, it seemed luxurious. She crossed to the window and looked out at the main street below. Silver Creek was settling into evening. Lamps were being lit in windows, casting golden squares of light onto the darkening street. A cowboy rode slowly past, his day's work done. Two women with marketing baskets walked arm in arm, heads bent in conversation, and there, tying his horse outside the livery stable, was Dawson Reed. Even from this distance, she recognized the set of his shoulders, the way he moved with that quiet confidence. He spoke briefly with the stable hand, then headed toward the saloon across the street. Nora watched until he disappeared inside, then turned away from the window. She shouldn't be thinking about him. There was too much to do, too many preparations to make for her new life here. Yet as she unpacked her meager belongings and prepared for her bath, her thoughts kept returning to those gray eyes and the way they'd looked at her, as if really seeing her, not just the schoolteacher from Boston, but Nora herself. After bathing and changing into a clean dress, dark blue cotton, simple but presentable, she made her way down to the hotel dining room. It was nearly empty at this late hour, just a few travelers and a table of men she assumed were local businessmen. She chose a table near the window and ordered the daily special, beef stew with fresh bread. She was halfway through her meal when the dining room door opened. Dawson stepped in, now wearing a clean shirt, his hair still damp from washing. Their eyes met across the room, and his momentary surprise gave way to a smile. "Miss Sullivan," he said, approaching her table, "I see you've found comfortable lodgings." "Mr. Reed," she replied, strangely pleased by his appearance. "Won't you join me?" He hesitated, then pulled out the chair across from her. "I wouldn't want to intrude on your dinner." "Not at all. I'd welcome the company." She gestured to the server to bring another setting. "Have you found accommodation for the night? Room above the saloon," he said. "It's not fancy, but it's clean enough. And tomorrow, will you speak with Mr. Richardson about work?" Dawson nodded. "Planning to ride out to the Double R first thing. It's about 5 miles east of town, I'm told." The server brought Dawson's meal, and for a few minutes they ate in companionable silence. Through the window, Nora could see the last light fading from the sky, stars beginning to appear. "It's a good town," Dawson said finally, breaking the silence. I asked around a bit. People seem honest, hardworking. The school's well supported. You made a good choice coming here. And you, do you think you'll stay? He considered the question. If Richardson has work for me, yes, I've been drifting long enough. What made you decide to stop drifting now? Dawson's eyes met hers. Maybe I finally found something worth stopping for. The air between them seemed to thicken. Nora's heart beat a little faster. Before she could respond, however, the dining room door burst open. A man in a sheriff's badge stood there, his expression urgent. "Anyone here know doctoring?" he called. "There's been an accident at the mill. Doc Sullivan's already there, but he needs help." Dawson was on his feet immediately. "I have some experience, field medicine from the war," the sheriff nodded. "Come with me then." Dawson turned to Nora. "I'm sorry to cut this short." "Go," she said. "They need you." He hesitated, then reached across the table and briefly touched her hand. "I'll find you before I leave for the ranch tomorrow." Then he was gone, following the sheriff out into the night. Nora sat back in her chair, her meal forgotten. The brief touch of his fingers against hers seemed to linger on her skin. Outside, voices raised in alarm, and people hurried past the window toward the eastern end of town, where, presumably, the mill was located. Nora considered following. Perhaps she could help, but exhaustion weighed her down. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. She needed rest to face them. After settling her bill, she returned to her room. As she prepared for bed, she found herself drawn once again to the window. In the distance, she could see lanterns clustered around a large building at the edge of town. Figures moved back and forth in the yellowish light. "Be careful, Dawson," she whispered to the night. Sleep came slowly, her mind too full of the day's events, of new faces and names to remember, of plans for her classroom, and of a certain cowboy with storm-gray eyes who had chosen the harder road to ensure her safety. Morning arrived with a gentle knock at her door. Nora, already dressed and arranging her hair, called. "Just a moment." She opened the door to find Elizabeth Cooper waiting, a basket over her arm. "Good morning. I hope you slept well. I've brought some fresh muffins from the bakery Mrs. Hollister makes the best in the territory." "How thoughtful," Nora said, genuinely touched by the gesture. "Please, come in while I finish with my hair." Elizabeth settled into the chair by the window while Nora pinned the last strands of her chestnut hair into a neat bun. "I heard about the accident at the mill last night." "Is everyone all right?" Elizabeth's expression sobered. "Young Billy Jenkins, the hotel owner's son, got his arm caught in one of the machines. It was quite bad, but Doc Sullivan thinks he'll keep the arm, thanks in part to that cowboy who helped." "Dawson Reed," Nora supplied, trying to keep her tone neutral. "Yes, that's him. Doc said he was impressed with the man's knowledge of trauma care." Elizabeth tilted her head curiously. "You know him. He escorted our stagecoach after we encountered bandits on the road. He was very brave." "Well, the whole town's talking about him this morning. Seems he was up all night helping with the boy, then went straight from the doctor's house to the Richardson ranch at dawn. Didn't even stop for breakfast." Nora felt a twinge of disappointment. "He'd said he would find her before leaving for the ranch. But of course, after a night with no sleep, he would be eager to secure work. She couldn't fault him for that." "Ready for your tour of Silver Creek?" Elizabeth asked, rising from the chair. Nora pushed thoughts of Dawson aside. "Absolutely. I'm especially eager to see the schoolhouse." The day passed in a whirlwind of introductions and orientations. Silver Creek proved to be larger and more developed than it had appeared from the stagecoach. Besides the expected businesses, general store, blacksmith, livery stable, saloon, there was a dressmaker's shop, a small newspaper office, a bank, and even a photographer's studio. The schoolhouse stood at the western edge of town, a simple white painted building with a bell tower. Adjacent to it was a small cottage that would serve as Nora's residence once repairs to its roof were completed. "It needs some work," Elizabeth admitted as they toured the cottage. "But the school board has approved funds for improvements. Mr. Carpenter will begin repairs tomorrow." "It's lovely," Nora said, already envisioning how she would arrange her few belongings in the space. After years of boarding with other teachers in Boston, having a place of her own, however modest, felt like luxury. The schoolhouse itself was well maintained, with rows of sturdy desks, a large blackboard, and bookshelves stocked with basic texts. Maps hung on the walls, and a pot-bellied stove stood ready for winter's chill. "We have 26 students enrolled," Elizabeth explained. "Ages 6 to 16. Most attend regularly, though during planting and harvest, some of the older boys are needed at home." "And what subjects am I expected to teach?" "Reading, writing, arithmetic, history, geography, some science if you're comfortable with it." "And the girls have expressed interest in learning proper penmanship and elocution." Nora nodded, already making mental notes. "I'll need to assess their current knowledge levels, perhaps divide them into groups based on ability rather than strictly by age." "I knew you were the right choice," Elizabeth said with an approving smile. "The previous teacher was less methodical." By late afternoon, Nora had met with several families, taken tea with the minister's wife, and begun organizing her teaching materials. Elizabeth left her at the schoolhouse to continue preparations, promising to return in an hour to escort her to dinner at the hotel. Alone in the quiet classroom, Nora sat at the teacher's desk and allowed herself a moment of reflection. Just days ago, she had been on that stagecoach, terrified as bandits threatened her life. Now she was here, beginning the work she had crossed half a continent to do, and Dawson Reed, where was he now? Had Robert Richardson hired him? Would he remain in Silver Creek, or would he drift on to some new horizon? The door to the schoolhouse creaked open, interrupting her thoughts. She looked up, expecting to see Elizabeth returned early. Instead, Dawson Reed stood in the doorway, his hat in his hands. "Miss Sullivan," he said, a smile warming his tired features. "I hope I'm not interrupting." Nora rose from her desk, her heart performing an unexpected leap. "Not at all. Please come in." He stepped into the schoolhouse, looking around with interest. "Nice place, good light." "It is," she agreed, suddenly aware of the silence stretching between them. "I heard about your help with the Jenkins boy. That was very good of you. Just did what needed doing." He shifted his weight, seeming uncharacteristically uncertain. "I wanted to apologize for not finding you this morning as I'd said I would, after the accident." "No apology needed," she assured him. "Elizabeth told me you went straight to the Richardson ranch. Did you speak with him? About work?" Dawson's face brightened. "I did. He hired me on as foreman." "Foreman, that's wonderful. Congratulations." "Thank you." He turned his hat in his hands. "It's a good position, stable. The ranch house is just 5 miles from town." Something in the way he emphasized the distance made Nora's pulse quicken. "Not too far at all." "No," he agreed, his eyes holding hers. "Not too far." A moment of silence passed between them, filled with unspoken possibilities. "I start work tomorrow," Dawson continued, "but I was hoping, that is, if you're not otherwise engaged, perhaps you might join me for dinner tonight to celebrate." The invitation, though hoped for, still caught Nora by surprise. She was aware of how this might appear, a single woman dining alone with a man she'd only just met. Yet something about Dawson Reed inspired trust, more than trust. In the short time she'd known him, he'd proven himself honorable, brave, and kind. "I'd like that very much," she said, "but I should warn you, the town will talk." A smile curved his mouth. "Let them. I've never much cared what others think." "A useful quality in the West, I imagine." "In life," he corrected. The schoolhouse door opened again, and Elizabeth Cooper entered, surprise registering on her face at finding them together. "Oh, Mr. Reed, I didn't expect to see you here." "Just stopped by to invite Miss Sullivan to dinner," he said straightforwardly. "To thank her for her company on the journey." Elizabeth's eyebrows rose slightly, but her smile remained polite. "How nice. I was just coming to escort Nora to the hotel myself, as we'd planned." Nora felt caught between obligations. "Elizabeth, would you mind terribly if I changed our arrangements? Mr. Reed and I have much to discuss about his new position at the Richardson ranch." Understanding dawned in Elizabeth's eyes. "Of course not. Another time." She glanced between them with poorly concealed curiosity. "Enjoy your evening." After she left, Dawson chuckled. "I believe we've just become the subject of tomorrow's gossip, undoubtedly." Nora gathered her shawl and reticule, "But as you said, let them talk." They walked side by side down the main street as the setting sun painted the buildings in gold and amber. People nodded greetings as they passed, some openly curious about the new schoolteacher in the company of the man who'd helped save Billy Jenkins. "Everyone seems to know you already," Nora observed. "Small towns," Dawson replied with a shrug. "News travels fast, and judgments are formed even faster." He glanced at her. "Does that concern you, what people might think about us?" The question hung in the air, significant in its implications. Us. As if there already was something to define. "I've learned that people will think what they wish, regardless of truth," she said carefully. "What matters is what we know to be true." They reached the hotel dining room, which was considerably more crowded than the previous evening. The server led them to a table near the back, offering some privacy from curious eyes. After they ordered, Dawson leaned forward, his expression serious. "There's something I want to tell you, Nora. Something about my past." Her heart skipped at his use of her first name. "You don't owe me explanations, Dawson. Maybe not, but I want you to know." He took a deep breath. "After the war, I wasn't in a good place, saw too much death, did things I'm not proud of. When I came west, I fell in with some men who lived outside the law." Nora listened, her face carefully neutral. "I never killed anyone who wasn't trying to kill me first," he continued. "But I did things that would land me in jail if certain marshals knew my real name." "Dawson Reed isn't your real name." "It is now, has been for 3 years since I left that life behind." His eyes held hers. "I've been working honest jobs, moving place to place, trying to outrun my past, but I'm tired of running. When I saw Silver Creek, something told me this could be home. If I let it." Nora considered his words. "Why tell me this? We barely know each other." "Don't we?" he countered softly. "I feel like I've known you much longer than a few days, and if I'm going to stay here, build something real, I want it to be based on truth, especially with you." The intensity in his gaze made her breath catch. "What happened on that stagecoach journey? The connection between us. It was unusual, wasn't it? Not just in my imagination, not just in your imagination," he confirmed. "From the moment I saw you standing up to those bandits, something in me recognized something in you. I can't explain it better than that." Their food arrived, momentarily halting the conversation. As they ate, Dawson told her more about the Richardson Ranch, the responsibilities he'd have as foreman, the plans for expanding the herd, the bunkhouse where he'd live until he could build something of his own. "Richardson's got a good operation," he said. "Fair man, treats his hands well. His wife runs the house with the same efficiency. They've got 2 daughters, both married and living in Helena." "It sounds like you've found a good situation," Nora observed. "I believe I have." He hesitated, then added, "But a job alone doesn't make a life worth living." The implication hung between them, unmistakable yet unspoken. After dinner, Dawson walked Nora back to the hotel. The night was clear, stars scattered across the sky like diamonds on black velvet. The street was quiet now, most businesses closed for the evening. "When do you start teaching?" Dawson asked as they strolled. "Monday, 3 days from now. I'll spend tomorrow and Saturday preparing lessons and meeting more families." She glanced up at him. "When will you move to the ranch?" "Tomorrow morning. Richardson's sending a wagon for my things." He slowed his steps as they neared the hotel. "I'll be busy getting settled, learning the operation, but I'd like to see you again, Nora, soon." They stopped at the hotel entrance. Around them, Silver Creek slept, unaware of the moment unfolding between 2 newcomers to its community. "I'd like that too," Nora said softly. Dawson took her hand, his touch gentle but sure. "Then I'll call on you. Sunday after church, perhaps we could take a walk. I'll look forward to it." She made no move to withdraw her hand from his. He stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him in the cool night air. "Nora, I want you to know, I chose to ride with that stagecoach because of you. I saw something in your eyes when you asked me to stay courage, and something else I couldn't name. I had to know what it was." "And did you find out?" she whispered. "I'm still discovering it," he replied, his voice equally soft. "But I know I want to keep discovering it day by day if you'll allow me." Slowly, giving her every chance to step away, he leaned down and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was gentle, questioning, a promise rather than a demand. Nora's eyes fluttered closed as she returned the pressure, her hand coming to rest lightly on his chest. When they parted, Dawson's eyes were dark with emotion. "I should go." "Yes," she agreed, though everything in her wanted him to stay. He released her hand reluctantly. "Sunday, then." "Sunday," she confirmed. She watched him walk away, his silhouette strong against the starlit street. At the corner, he turned and raised his hand in farewell before disappearing into the night. Nora touched her fingers to her lips, still feeling the impression of his kiss. In coming to Silver Creek, she had sought a new beginning, a place to rebuild her life after loss. She hadn't expected to find someone who made her heart race and her spirit soar. As she climbed the stairs to her room, Nora knew that whatever lay ahead for her, for Dawson, for them together the road would not always be easy. But sometimes, she was beginning to understand, the harder road led to the most worthwhile destinations. Sunday couldn't come fast enough. The next 2 days passed in a flurry of activity for Nora. She spent hours organizing the schoolhouse, developing lesson plans, and meeting the families of her future students. The children ranged from shy to boisterous, but all seemed eager to begin learning with their new teacher. Silver Creek welcomed her warmly. Mothers brought baked goods to the schoolhouse, fathers offered to build additional bookshelves, and the older girls volunteered to help clean and decorate the classroom. By Saturday evening, Nora felt as though she'd lived in the town for months rather than days. Throughout it all, thoughts of Dawson hovered at the edges of her mind. She wondered how he was settling in at the Richardson Ranch, if the work was what he'd hoped for, if he thought of her as often as she thought of him. Elizabeth, who had appointed herself Nora's unofficial guide to Silver Creek society, provided what information she could. "Robert Richardson's quite pleased with his new foreman," she mentioned as they sorted donated books on Saturday afternoon. "Apparently Mr. Reed has already reorganized the breeding records and suggested improvements to the corral design." Nora smiled to herself. It didn't surprise her that Dawson would waste no time proving his worth. "He seems very capable," Elizabeth continued, watching Nora's reaction closely. "And rather handsome in a rugged sort of way, though of course we know very little about him." "Sometimes a fresh start is exactly what a person needs," Nora replied evenly. "Silver Creek offered that to me, why not to Mr. Reed as well?" Elizabeth considered this. "You're right, of course. It's just that unmarried men of quality are rare in these parts. The eligible ladies of Silver Creek will be quite interested in your Mr. Reed." "He's hardly my Mr. Reed," Nora protested, though the words sent an unexpected pang through her. "Perhaps not yet," Elizabeth said with a knowing smile. "But I saw how he looked at you in the schoolhouse, and I've heard about your dinner together." Nora felt her cheeks warm. "News truly does travel quickly here." "It's our primary form of entertainment," Elizabeth laughed. "But don't worry, the talk has been favorable. Everyone's impressed by how he helped with young Billy Jenkins, and Dr. Sullivan speaks highly of his medical knowledge. The fact that Richardson hired him as foreman straight away says much about his character." That evening, alone in her hotel room, Nora stood at the window gazing eastward toward the Richardson Ranch that lay beyond her sight. Tomorrow, after church, she would see Dawson again. The thought both thrilled and terrified her. What was happening between them was moving so quickly. In Boston, courtships proceeded at a measured pace, with proper introductions, chaperone visits, and months of acquaintance before any declarations of affection. But the West operated by different rules. Life here was more immediate, more honest in its demands and rewards. And wasn't that part of why she'd come? To leave behind the stifling conventions of her old life. To find something authentic and meaningful. Sunday dawned bright and clear. Nora dressed with extra care in her best dress, a deep green wool that complemented her eyes, and pinned her hair in a style slightly less severe than her usual teaching arrangement. The small pearl earrings that had been her mother's completed her appearance. Church service was held in the newly constructed building at the center of town. Nearly everyone in Silver Creek attended, as much for the social gathering as for spiritual guidance. Nora was introduced to dozens more townspeople, all curious about the new schoolteacher. She kept glancing toward the door, watching for Dawson, but the service began without his appearance. Disappointment settled in her stomach. Had he forgotten, changed his mind? The minister, a jovial man with a booming voice, led them through hymns and prayers before delivering a sermon on community and welcome. As he spoke, the church door opened quietly. Nora turned with the rest of the congregation. Dawson stood in the doorway, hat in hand, looking slightly uncomfortable in a clean white shirt and dark vest. His hair was neatly combed, his face freshly shaved. When his eyes found Nora in the congregation, his entire expression softened. He slipped into a back pew as the minister continued his sermon. Throughout the remainder of the service, Nora was acutely aware of his presence behind her. When it came time to sing the final hymn, she could hear his deep baritone among the voices, not the most melodic but sincere in its effort. After the benediction, the congregation spilled out onto the church steps and lawn, forming small groups for conversation. Nora found herself surrounded by mothers eager to discuss their children's education. She answered their questions patiently, all the while scanning the crowd for Dawson. She finally spotted him near the church gate, engaged in conversation with Robert Richardson, a barrel-chested man with a silver beard and several other ranchers. Dawson stood with easy confidence among them, clearly already accepted as one of their own. As if sensing her gaze, he looked up. Their eyes met across the churchyard, and he excused himself from the men. Nora similarly extricated herself from the mothers, and they converged near the large oak tree that shaded the church grounds. "Good morning, Miss Sullivan," Dawson said formally, aware of the many eyes upon them. "You look lovely today." "Thank you, Mr. Reed," she replied with equal formality. "It's good to see you at church." "First time in longer than I care to admit," he said with a small smile, but it seemed a good way to begin this new chapter. Something in his expression told her he meant more than just his new job. Before she could respond, Elizabeth approached them, her smile bright. "Mr. Reed, how nice to see you. Are you settling in well at the Richardson Ranch?" "Yes, madam, it's good work with good people." "Excellent." Elizabeth glanced between them. "I believe you and our new teacher had plans for the afternoon," Dawson nodded. "If Miss Sullivan is still available for that walk we discussed." "I am," Nora confirmed. "Wonderful." Elizabeth's eyes twinkled with barely suppressed matchmaking delight. "The path along the creek is particularly pleasant this time of year. The wildflowers are in bloom." After a few more minutes of polite conversation, Dawson offered Nora his arm. "Shall we?" They walked away from the church, aware of curious glances following them but too focused on each other to care. Once they were beyond the immediate view of the congregation, Dawson's formal posture relaxed. "I've been thinking about you," he admitted as they turned onto the path that led toward the creek. "Every minute I wasn't focused on learning the ranch operations." "I've thought of you too," Nora said, matching his honesty with her own, "though I've been quite busy with preparations for school." "Tell me about it," he encouraged. "What are your plans for teaching?" As they strolled along the creek, Nora described her educational philosophy, her hopes for her students, the challenges she anticipated. Dawson listened attentively, asking thoughtful questions that revealed his own intelligence and interest. "You'll be wonderful," he said when she paused for breath. "Those children are fortunate to have you. And the Richardson Ranch, is it what you hoped for?" Dawson nodded, gazing out at the clear water of the creek as it bubbled over smooth stones. "Better, actually. Richardson runs a tight operation, but he's fair, trusts his men to do their jobs. The hands seem like good fellows, most of them. There's one or two I'll be keeping an eye on, but that's normal in any outfit." They found a fallen log beside the water and sat down, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. "The foreman's cabin needs work," Dawson continued. "Been empty for a while since the last man moved on. But it's solid, good views of the valley." He hesitated, then added, "Room enough for a family eventually." Nora's heart quickened at the implication. "You're thinking of settling permanently then?" "I am." His eyes, so direct and honest, met hers. "For the first time in years, I'm thinking beyond the next month or the next job. I'm thinking about building something lasting." A comfortable silence fell between them, filled only by the sound of the creek and distant birdsong. Nora felt a sense of peace she hadn't experienced in a very long time. "Tell me about Boston," Dawson said after a while. "What was your life like there?" Nora thought about the crowded streets, the rigid social expectations, the weight of her parents' legacy. "Confined," she said finally. "After my parents died, I continued teaching at the same school, living in the same boarding house, walking the same routes each day. Everything was prescribed, orderly, and empty," he guessed. "Yes," she admitted. "I felt as though I was simply going through the motions of living, not truly alive. When I saw the advertisement for a teacher in Montana Territory, something inside me just woke up. I knew I had to come." "I'm glad you did," Dawson said simply. Their hands lay side by side on the log. Slowly, deliberately, he covered hers with his own. The touch was warm, grounding, full of promise. "Nora," he began, his voice low and serious. "I know we've known each other only a short time. By the standards of proper society, what I'm about to say would be considered premature, perhaps even inappropriate." She turned to face him fully. "We're not in proper society anymore." A smile curved his mouth. "No, we're not." He took a deep breath. "I've lived enough life to recognize something rare when I find it. What's between us, this connection, I've never felt anything like it before, and I don't want to waste time pretending I'm not certain of my feelings." Nora's breath caught in her throat. "What are you saying, Dawson?" "I'm saying that I'm falling in love with you," he said plainly. "I'm saying that when I think about my future in Silver Creek, you're at the center of it. I'm saying that I want to court you properly if you'll allow it, and if in time you come to feel as I do, I want to build a life with you." The directness of his declaration left her momentarily speechless. In Boston, such words would come only after months of careful interaction, veiled in propriety and restraint. But here, with the creek flowing beside them and the mountains rising in the distance, Dawson's honesty felt right as natural and essential as breathing. "I feel it too," she whispered. "This connection between us, it frightens me how quickly it's happened, how deeply I already care for you. But it also feels inevitable, as if the person I was becoming all along was meant to find you here." Dawson's hand tightened on hers. "Then you'll allow me to court you?" "Yes," she said, certainty flowing through her, "though I suspect the town is already quite convinced we're courting." He laughed, the sound rich and full. "Small towns, no secrets." "None at all," she agreed, leaning slightly toward him. Taking her cue, Dawson closed the distance between them. This kiss was different from their first, deeper, more certain, a confirmation rather than a question. Nora's hand came up to rest against his cheek, feeling the smoothness of his freshly shaved skin beneath her palm. When they parted, his eyes were dark with emotion. "I should get you back to town before the gossips have too much to discuss." "Too late for that," she said with a smile. They walked back toward Silver Creek hand in hand, no longer concerned with who might see. The afternoon sun cast long shadows as they reached the main street, where Sunday dinner was being prepared in nearly every home. "When can I see you again?" Dawson asked as they approached the hotel. "I begin teaching tomorrow," Nora reminded him. "My days will be full, but my evenings are my own." "Wednesday," he suggested. "I can ride into town after work, perhaps dinner." "I'd like that." He raised her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. "Until Wednesday, then." Nora watched him mount his horse and ride east, toward the Richardson Ranch. As she turned to enter the hotel, she caught sight of Elizabeth Cooper watching from the dressmaker's shop across the street, a knowing smile on her face. The rumors would be flying by breakfast tomorrow. But for once in her life, Nora Sullivan didn't care what anyone thought about her choices. She was blazing her own trail now, with a man who had chosen the harder road just to walk beside her. Monday morning arrived with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. Nora stood before her classroom of 26 students, ranging from tiny 6-year-old Lucy Barnes, missing her front teeth, to towering 16-year-old James Peterson, who looked as though he'd rather be anywhere else. "Good morning," she began, her voice steady despite the butterflies in her stomach. "I'm Miss Sullivan, and I'm very pleased to be your new teacher." The children regarded her with varying degrees of curiosity, wariness, and hope. Nora took a deep breath and launched into her carefully prepared introduction, explaining her expectations and the subjects they would study. By mid-morning, she had assessed their reading levels, divided them into appropriate groups, and begun teaching in earnest. The day flew by in a blur of lessons, questions, and small dramas: a spilled inkwell, a disputed pencil ownership, a crying first grader missing her mother. By the time the final bell rang, Nora was exhausted but exhilarated. This was why she had come west, to make a difference, to build something meaningful. As the children filed out, several parents waited in the schoolyard to hear about the first day. Nora answered their questions, accepted their welcomes, and promised detailed updates on their children's progress. The sun was setting by the time she locked the schoolhouse door and began the short walk to the hotel. "Miss Sullivan." She turned to see Dr. David Sullivan, Sarah's husband, approaching with his medical bag in hand. "Dr. Sullivan, good evening. Please call me David." "After all, we share a surname, though no relation that I know of." He fell into step beside her. "I wanted to thank you for your kindness to Sarah during the journey. She told me how you helped with the baby during that difficult trek through the woods." "It was nothing," Nora assured him. "She was very brave. She also mentioned your friend, Mr. Reed, a remarkable man from what I observed while we treated young Billy Jenkins. Steady hands, quick thinking." "Yes, he is rather remarkable," Nora agreed, unable to keep the warmth from her voice. David smiled knowingly. "Sarah thought there might be something developing between you two. I'm glad. Silver Creek needs good people who understand the value of community." They reached the hotel, where David tipped his hat in farewell. "Sarah hopes you'll join us for dinner soon. Perhaps this weekend, Mr. Reed would be welcome as well, of course." "That's very kind. I'll discuss it with him when I see him Wednesday." David's eyes twinkled. "Excellent. Good night, Miss Sullivan." The next 2 days passed in similar fashion: busy school days followed by evenings of lesson preparation and grading. Nora moved into her cottage behind the schoolhouse on Tuesday, grateful for the privacy and space it afforded, though the roof still leaked in one corner when it rained that night. By Wednesday afternoon, she was watching the clock with increasing frequency, aware of the butterflies returning to her stomach. Dawson had sent a note with one of the Richardson Ranch hands that morning, confirming their dinner plans and mentioning that he had a surprise for her. When the last student departed, Nora hurried to her cottage to change from her teaching clothes into something more suitable for an evening out. She chose a dress of soft blue cotton with a lace collar that framed her face. Her hair she arranged in a looser style than her usual teaching bun, allowing a few tendrils to frame her face. A knock at her door precisely at 6 o'clock made her heart leap. She opened it to find Dawson standing there, hat in hand, a small bouquet of wildflowers extended toward her. "These aren't much compared to what you probably had in Boston," he said, "but they reminded me of you." Nora accepted the flowers, touching the delicate purple and yellow blooms. "They're perfect, thank you." Dawson looked handsome in a clean shirt and vest, his hair still damp from washing. The week of physical labor had added a healthy color to his face, making his gray eyes seem even more vivid. "You look beautiful," he said, his gaze warm with appreciation. "Thank you." She gestured to the cottage interior. "Would you like to come in while I put these in water?" He stepped inside, looking around with interest at her simple living quarters. Books lined the small shelf beside her bed, and papers covered the table that served as both dining and workspace. "It's not much," she said as she arranged the flowers in a jar, "but it's mine." "It suits you," he replied. "Simple, practical, but with touches of beauty." He nodded toward a small landscape painting hanging on the wall, her one luxury brought from Boston. "How is the roof repair coming along?" he asked, glancing upward at the ceiling. "Mr. Carpenter has been working on it, but there's still a leak when it rains heavily." She placed the flowers on the table. "Shall we go to dinner?" He offered his arm. "Actually, that's part of my surprise. I thought we might do something different tonight." Intrigued, Nora allowed him to lead her outside. Tied to the hitching post was his horse, saddled and ready with a large basket secured behind the saddle. A picnic. she guessed, delighted by the idea. If you're willing, he confirmed. There's a spot overlooking the valley that I discovered while riding fence yesterday. The view at sunset is spectacular. It sounds wonderful. With practiced ease, Dawson lifted her onto the saddle, then mounted behind her. Nora was acutely aware of his solid warmth at her back, his arms encircling her as he took the reins. They rode out of town at a leisurely pace, acknowledging greetings from townspeople they passed. "How is your first week of teaching going?" Dawson asked as they left the buildings behind and entered the open countryside. Nora told him about her students, the challenges of teaching such a wide range of ages and abilities, the small victories she'd already experienced. He listened attentively, asking questions that showed genuine interest. "You sound happy," he observed when she paused for breath. "I am," she realized. "Tired but happy. The work feels meaningful, and the children are wonderful, each in their own way. Even young James Peterson." Dawson asked with a chuckle. "Richardson mentioned his oldest hand has a boy in your school who's more interested in horses than books." "Even James," Nora confirmed. "He's actually quite bright. I've discovered he enjoys stories about exploration and adventure. I'm using that to engage him in reading and geography." Clever approach. They turned off the main trail onto a narrower path that wound upward through stands of pine. The air grew cooler as they climbed, fragrant with the scent of evergreen and wild sage. "And the ranch?" Nora asked. "Is it still going well?" "Better than expected," Dawson said. "Richardson has big plans for expansion, and he's giving me a free hand to implement them. The men respect hard work more than talk, so I've been showing them I can pull my weight alongside them." "Hence the new calluses I felt when you helped me onto the horse," he laughed. "You notice everything, don't you, school teacher?" "I try to," she admitted. "It's how I make sense of the world." They emerged from the trees onto a grassy plateau that looked out over the entire valley. Silver Creek lay below them, its buildings miniaturized by distance, while the Richardson Ranch spread to the east. Beyond, the mountains rose in purple majesty against the darkening sky, the highest peaks still catching the golden light of the setting sun. "Oh, Dawson," Nora breathed. "It's magnificent." He helped her dismount, his hands lingering at her waist for a moment longer than necessary. "Worth the ride, absolutely." While Dawson unsaddled his horse to let it graze, Nora explored the plateau. Wildflowers dotted the grass, and a small stream trickled along one edge before disappearing over the side of the cliff. The air up here was so clear, so pure, it made her feel as though she could see forever. "Hungry?" Dawson called, spreading a blanket on a flat area of ground. They sat together as he unpacked the basket: fried chicken, biscuits, pickled vegetables, and a jar of preserved peaches. Simple fare but perfect for their mountain perch. "Did you make all this?" Nora asked, impressed. Dawson laughed. "Lord, no, Mrs. Richardson took pity on me when I mentioned our dinner. She said, and I quote, 'No woman should be subjected to your cooking this early in a courtship.'" Nora smiled at that. "So everyone at the ranch knows about us." "I haven't been exactly subtle about my interest in the new schoolteacher," he admitted, handing her a plate. "And in a place like this, there are no secrets." They ate as the sun sank lower, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. Conversation flowed easily between them, moving from daily events to deeper topics: books they'd read, places they'd seen, beliefs they held. "Have you always wanted to be a teacher?" Dawson asked as they finished the peaches. Nora considered the question. "Not always. As a girl, I dreamed of adventure, traveling the world, seeing exotic places." She smiled ruefully. "My parents had more practical aspirations for me. Teaching was respectable, secure. And now, do you still dream of adventure?" She looked out at the vast landscape spread before them, the wilderness that represented so much of what had drawn her west. "I think I've realized that adventure isn't always about distant lands or grand exploits. Sometimes it's about having the courage to build a new life, to open yourself to new possibilities." Dawson's eyes held hers. "Like the possibility of us?" "Yes," she said softly. "Like that." He reached for her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "When I left the army, I was lost. The things I'd seen, the things I'd done, they haunted me. I drifted, took jobs that kept me moving, avoided putting down roots, even fell in with those outlaws for a time, as I told you. Nora listened, sensing he needed to unburden himself. The turning point came when I was with the Shoshone, he continued. Their chief, an old man who'd seen more suffering than most, told me that a man can't outrun his past. He can only make peace with it, then build a future worthy of his survival. Wise advice, Nora murmured. It was. I've been trying to live by it ever since. His hand tightened on hers. When I saw you on that stagecoach, standing brave despite your fear, I knew you were part of that future I wanted to build. The directness of his words stole her breath. In the fading light, his face was both vulnerable and strong, a man who had seen darkness yet chose to walk toward light. I feel the same, she said. From that first day, there was something between us, something I couldn't explain but couldn't ignore. Dawson moved closer, his free hand coming up to cup her cheek. Nora Sullivan, I know it hasn't been long, but I'm certain of what I feel. I'm falling in love with you, maybe have been since the moment I saw you. Her heart soared at his words. I'm falling in love with you too, Dawson Reed. He kissed her then, gentle at first, then with growing passion as she responded. Her arms wound around his neck, drawing him closer. In that moment, on a mountaintop with the last light of day painting the sky, Nora knew she had found what she'd been seeking when she left Boston, not just a new place, but a new heart to walk beside her own. When they finally broke apart, stars had begun to appear overhead. Dawson rested his forehead against hers. We should head back before it gets too dark to navigate the trail. Yes, she agreed reluctantly. They packed up the remains of their picnic and saddled the horse. The ride back to Silver Creek was quiet, both of them wrapped in the contentment of newfound love and the physical closeness that the shared saddle required. At her cottage door, Dawson kissed her once more, lingering but respectful. I have to ride to Helena with Richardson tomorrow to purchase new breeding stock. I'll be gone 3 days. I'll miss you, she said, surprised at how much she meant it. And I'll miss you. He touched her cheek. But I'll be thinking of you every minute I'm away. And when I return, perhaps you join me for Sunday dinner at the ranch. The Richardsons are eager to meet you. I'd be honored. One last kiss, and he was gone, riding back toward the ranch with the moonlight silvering his silhouette. Nora watched until he disappeared from sight, her heart fuller than she could ever remember it being. Inside her cottage, she touched her lips, still feeling the impression of his kisses. The wildflowers he'd brought stood in their jar on the table, humble yet beautiful like the love growing between them. 3 months passed, each day deepening the bond between Nora and Dawson. Summer faded into autumn, painting the landscape in golds and reds. The rhythm of their lives settled into a comfortable pattern, Nora teaching during the week, Dawson managing the expanding operations of the Richardson Ranch, and precious time together whenever their duties allowed. Silver Creek had fully embraced them both. Nora's teaching methods earned praise from parents and the school board alike, while Dawson's leadership had improved the Richardson Ranch's productivity significantly. That they were courting was accepted as natural and right. The only questions that arose in town gossip were when, not if, they would marry. On a crisp October Sunday, they rode together to their special plateau for a picnic. The valley below had transformed since their first visit, the greens of summer replaced by autumn's richer palette. A light dusting of snow already capped the distant mountains, hinting at the winter to come. Your cottage roof is finally fixed properly, Dawson asked as they spread their blanket on the grass. Yes, Mr. Carpenter finished it last week. Nora unpacked their food, bread, cheese, apples from the Richardson orchard. Just in time, too. Elizabeth says we're due for an early winter. Dawson nodded, gazing thoughtfully at the horizon. Richardson's feeling it too. He's having us bring the herd down from the high pastures earlier than usual. Something in his tone made Nora look up. Is everything all right? You seem preoccupied today. He met her eyes, a smile softening his features. Nothing's wrong. Just thinking about the future. What about it? Instead of answering directly, he reached into his pocket and withdrew a small wooden box. Nora's breath caught. I've been carrying this around for 2 weeks, waiting for the right moment, he said, turning the box in his hands. But I'm realizing there's no perfect moment except the one you make. He shifted to one knee beside her on the blanket. Nora Sullivan, these past months have been the happiest of my life. You've brought light and purpose to my days in a way I never thought possible. Nora's heart pounded against her ribs as he continued, I love you. I want to build a life with you, face whatever comes together, grow old beside you. He opened the box, revealing a simple gold band set with a small, perfect diamond. Will you marry me? Tears blurred her vision. Yes, she whispered, then louder. Yes, Dawson, yes. His face broke into a radiant smile as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. How did you know my size? She asked, admiring the way the diamond caught the sunlight. I may have enlisted Elizabeth's help, he admitted. She borrowed one of your gloves supposedly for a pattern she was making. Nora laughed. No wonder she's been looking so smug lately. How many people know about this? Probably the entire town by now, Dawson said ruefully. I asked Richardson for advice on the ring and his wife overheard. And I spoke with Reverend Thomas last week about performing the ceremony. You've been busy. She leaned forward to kiss him, pouring all her love into the contact. When they parted, Dawson kept hold of her hands. There's something else I want to show you today. More surprises. Just one. He helped her to her feet. We'll need to ride a bit farther. They packed up their barely touched picnic and mounted Dawson's horse. He guided them down from the plateau and along a ridge that Nora hadn't explored before. After about 20 minutes, they came to a clearing overlooking a small, sheltered valley. A creek, a tributary of the one that gave Silver Creek its name, wound through the golden grass. It's beautiful, Nora said, taking in the peaceful scene. It's ours, Dawson replied. Or it will be once the paperwork is finalized next week. Nora turned to him in surprise. Ours, he nodded, his eyes bright with excitement. 160 acres. Richardson is selling it to me at a fair price. There's good water, good grazing land, and that rise over there, he pointed to a gentle slope near the creek, would be perfect for a house. Our house. Overwhelmed, Nora looked from the land back to Dawson. You're building a ranch, a modest one to start. I've saved most of my earnings these past years, and Richardson has offered me some of his stock as part of my payment for improving his operation. His expression grew serious. It won't be easy, Nora. Building a ranch from nothing is hard work, especially in this country. The winters are brutal and there are 1,000 things that can go wrong. But we'll face them together, she said, understanding what he was trying to tell her. Yes, relief washed over his face. I wouldn't ask you to share this life if I wasn't certain we could make it work. The ranch is close enough to town that you can continue teaching, at least until he stopped, color rising in his cheeks. Until we have children. She finished for him, her own cheeks warming at the thought. If you want them, he said carefully. I do, she assured him. Very much. They dismounted to explore their future home on foot. Dawson had clearly given considerable thought to the layout of the ranch, where the house would stand, where they would build the barn and corrals, which fields would be best for different purposes. We can start construction before winter sets in, he explained as they walked. Get the foundation laid for the house, at least. Richardson has offered the use of his bunkhouse until our place is ready, and some of his men have volunteered to help with the building. The community here is remarkable, Nora observed. Everyone supports each other. It's how people survive out here, Dawson agreed. No one makes it alone. They reached the creek, where clear water bubbled over smooth stones. Nora knelt to trail her fingers through the cool current. When would you like to be married? Dawson crouched beside her. I was thinking December, before the worst of winter, unless that's too soon, she smiled, meeting his eyes. Not too soon at all. Richardson has offered to host the wedding at the ranch, he continued. His wife is already planning the feast. You've thought of everything. I wanted to be sure, he said simply. Sure that I could offer you a good life, sure that I had something worthy to bring to our marriage. Nora touched his face, moved by his consideration. The only thing I need you to bring is yourself, Dawson Reed. Everything else we'll build together. He turned his head to kiss her palm. I never thought I'd find this a woman who sees me for who I really am and loves me anyway, a chance to create something lasting, a place to belong. Nor I, she admitted. When I left Boston, I was seeking something, I didn't know what, but it was you, Dawson. It was always meant to be you. They sealed this understanding with a kiss beside the creek that would water their future home. Above them, an eagle soared on thermal currents, free and purposeful in its flight, much like the love that had brought them to this moment. The wedding of Dawson Reed and Nora Sullivan on a clear December day became the social event of the season in Silver Creek. The Richardson Ranch house was decorated with evergreen boughs and red ribbons. The large dining table expanded to accommodate the feast that followed the ceremony. Nearly everyone in town attended, along with ranchers from surrounding properties, and even a few Shoshone friends of Dawson's, who brought beautifully crafted gifts and participated in the celebration with dignified pleasure. Nora wore a dress of ivory silk that Elizabeth and several other women had worked on in secret, while Dawson looked distinguished in a new black suit, his normally unruly hair tamed for the occasion. Reverend Thomas performed the ceremony with warmth and humor, and not a few tears were shed when the couple exchanged their vows. "I promise to walk beside you on whatever road life takes us," Dawson said, his voice steady as he slipped the gold band onto Nora's finger to join her engagement ring. "To share your burdens and your joys, to honor and cherish you all the days of my life. I promise to be your partner in all things," Nora responded, placing his ring on his finger. "To face each challenge with you, to create a home filled with love and understanding, to walk with you in faith and hope as long as we both shall live." The celebration continued well into the evening, with music and dancing, speeches and toasts. Robert Richardson, his face flushed with good whiskey and genuine affection, raised his glass high. "To Dawson and Nora," he proclaimed, "may your union be blessed with prosperity, health, and many children to carry on the legacy you're building." As darkness fell, the newlyweds slipped away from the festivities to the foreman's cabin, which had been prepared for their wedding night. A fire burned in the hearth, casting a warm glow over the simple but comfortable space. Flowers hothouse blooms brought in specially from Helena scented the air. "Welcome home, Mrs. Reed," Dawson said softly, closing the door behind them. Nora stepped into his arms, heart full to bursting. I loved the sound of that. Their first night as husband and wife was everything Nora had dreamed, tender, passionate, a perfect union of body and soul. In Dawson's arms, she found a completion she hadn't known she was seeking, a sense of belonging that transcended physical desire. They spent 2 weeks in the foreman's cabin, a honeymoon of sorts, though Dawson still attended to his ranch duties, and Nora used the time to prepare lessons for the new school term. In the evenings, they sat before the fire making plans for their own home, which was already taking shape on their land. The foundation had been laid before the ground froze, and lumber was being prepared for spring construction. Their days fell into a rhythm, Dawson rising before dawn to work with the ranch hands, Nora teaching in the schoolhouse, their evenings and nights together in the snug cabin. Winter descended in earnest, with snowstorms that sometimes kept Nora in town overnight at the hotel when the roads were impassable. During one such separation, she wrote in her journal, "I never imagined that marriage could be like this, a true partnership, a sharing of thoughts and dreams, a physical union that only grows more meaningful with time." Dawson continues to surprise me with his depth, his gentleness, his unwavering support of my teaching. I thought I understood love before, but I was mistaken. This, what we are building together, is beyond anything I could have envisioned. Spring arrived late but gloriously, the snow melting to reveal tender green shoots and wildflowers dotting the awakening landscape. Construction on their house resumed with renewed vigor. Dawson, with help from friends and hired workers, raised the frame and walls while Nora planted a garden that would feed them through the coming year. By early summer, the house was sufficiently complete for them to move in, though some finishing work remained. It was smaller than they eventually planned, just 4 rooms to start, but solidly built, and thoughtfully designed. Large windows captured light and views of their land, while a broad porch wrapped around two sides, perfect for watching sunsets or summer storms rolling across the valley. The day they moved from the foreman's cabin to their own home was one of quiet joy. They carried their few possessions, books, clothing, wedding gifts, the special items Nora had brought from Boston across the threshold together. "What do you think?" Dawson asked, watching her face as she explored the rooms that were now truly theirs. Nora turned in a slow circle, taking in the simple furnishings, the fireplace built from river stones, the curtains she had sewn herself hanging at the windows. "It's perfect," she said, tears of happiness welling in her eyes. "Absolutely perfect." That night they sat on their porch watching stars appear in the darkening sky, Dawson's arm around Nora's shoulders, her head resting against him. "Happy?" he asked. "Completely," she assured him. "Though I've been thinking." "About," she sat up to look at him, a smile playing at her lips, "about our family, about perhaps starting it sooner rather than later." Understanding dawned in his eyes. "Are you saying?" "Not yet," she clarified. "But I've decided not to renew my teaching contract for the fall term. Elizabeth has found a very capable replacement, a young woman from Denver with excellent references." Dawson studied her face. "Are you sure? I know how much your teaching means to you." "It does mean a great deal," she acknowledged. "But building our ranch, our family, that means more, and it's not forever. Once our children are older, I can teach again if I wish." He pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Whatever you want, Nora, I'll support you either way." "I know you will," she said. "That's part of why I love you so much." As summer progressed, their ranch took shape around them. Corrals and a barn rose near the house, and the first of their own cattle, 20 head given by Richardson as a wedding gift, plus 10 more purchased with Dawson's savings, grazed in the lush valley pastures. They acquired chickens, 2 milk cows, and a pair of plow horses to help clear fields for future crops. The work was endless and often exhausting, but they faced it together, learning each other's strengths and compensating for weaknesses. Dawson discovered that Nora had a remarkable head for figures and record-keeping, while she came to rely on his practical knowledge of the land and animals. By autumn, when the aspen trees turned golden on the mountainsides and the first frost silvered the grass, Nora knew what she had suspected for several weeks. She was carrying their first child. She told Dawson on a clear October day as they rode to their special plateau for a picnic, a celebration of their engagement anniversary. His face, when he understood her meaning, transformed with such joy that it brought tears to her eyes. "A baby," he said in wonder, his hand gentle on her still flat stomach. "Our baby." "Due in late spring, Dr. Sullivan thinks," she confirmed. "May, perhaps early June." Dawson gathered her in his arms, holding her as if she were made of the most precious glass. "I'll build a cradle," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "And we'll need to finish the second bedroom before winter sets in," she laughed against his chest. "We have time, my love, though I won't object to having the cradle ready early." That winter was harsh, with blizzards that howled around their snug house in temperatures that plunged well below zero. But inside, warmed by their fireplace and their love, Nora and Dawson planned for their child's arrival. He crafted a beautiful cradle from pine and cedar, while she sewed tiny garments and quilted a blanket from scraps of their own clothing, a tangible representation of the love that had created this new life. As her body changed, growing round with their child, Dawson's tenderness toward her only increased. He took on the heaviest chores without being asked, massaged her aching back in the evenings, and read aloud to her from their favorite books as they sat before the fire. "I never thought I could be this happy," he confessed one night as they lay in bed, his hand resting protectively over her swollen belly. "Never thought I deserved it after some of the things I've done." "Everyone deserves a chance at happiness," Nora murmured, covering his hand with hers. "And you've worked so hard to build this life, this home." "We've built it together," he corrected. "Every day I thank whatever fate or providence brought you to this territory, put you on that stagecoach at that exact moment. It does seem like more than coincidence," she agreed. That you were there, that you chose to ride with us despite having an easier route available." He pressed a kiss to her shoulder. "Best decision I ever made." Spring returned to the valley, melting the snow and bringing new growth to their land. Calves were born, the garden planted, and Nora's time grew near. Dr. Sullivan visited regularly to check on her progress, pronouncing both mother and child healthy and strong. On a perfect June morning, with sunlight streaming through the bedroom window and meadowlarks singing in the fields, Nora went into labor. Dawson sent one of his ranch hands galloping to town to fetch the doctor, then returned to her side, his face a mixture of concern and excitement. "I'm all right," she assured him, breathing through a contraction. "Women have been doing this since the beginning of time." "Doesn't make it any less miraculous," he replied, holding her hand, "or terrifying, doctor." Sullivan arrived by mid-morning, accompanied by his wife Sarah, who had become one of Nora's dearest friends. Together they prepared for the birth while Dawson paced the porch, alternating between prayer and mild profanity. After 6 hours of labor, which Nora would later describe as the hardest and most rewarding work she'd ever done, their daughter entered the world with a powerful cry that immediately captured her father's heart. "She's perfect," Dawson whispered when the doctor finally allowed him into the bedroom. Tears streamed unashamedly down his face as he gazed at the tiny bundle in Nora's arms. "Absolutely perfect." "Would you like to hold her?" Nora asked, her own eyes shining with exhausted joy. With infinite care, Dawson took his daughter into his arms. She weighed almost nothing, this miraculous being they had created together, yet she represented everything: their love, their future, their shared dreams. "Hello, little one," he murmured, touching her tiny hand with one finger. "I'm your papa." The baby's eyes, still unfocused, seemed to look toward his voice. Her small fingers curled reflexively around his larger one. "What shall we name her?" Nora asked, watching the two people she loved most in the world. Dawson considered the perfect face of his daughter. "What about Hope?" "Because that's what she represents to me, hope for the future, for all the good things still to come." "Hope Reed," Nora tested the name, finding it both strong and gentle. "It's perfect." And so their daughter was named, baptized in the Silver Creek Church 2 weeks later, with what seemed like the entire town in attendance. Robert and Martha Richardson stood as godparents, beaming with pride as if Hope were their own grandchild. Life with a newborn brought new challenges and deep joys. Nights of broken sleep were balanced by mornings watching the sunrise with Hope cradled against Nora's chest. The endless demands of the ranch had to be scheduled around feedings and naps. Yet somehow their love only deepened through these shared experiences, these small daily miracles of watching their daughter grow. "She has your eyes," Nora observed when Hope was 3 months old, her gaze now clearly the same storm gray as her father's. "But your smile," Dawson countered, watching as their daughter grinned toothlessly up at them from her blanket on the porch. As Hope grew, so did the Reed Ranch. By her first birthday, they had doubled their herd, added a proper bunkhouse for the 2 hands they now employed, and expanded their house with 2 additional bedrooms for the brothers or sisters Hope will have someday, as Dawson put it. That someday came sooner than they had planned. When Hope was 18 months old, Nora discovered she was expecting again. This pregnancy was easier than the first, her body already knowing the path. On a snowy February night, with a blizzard raging outside their snug home, William Robert Reed made his entrance into the world delivered by his father when Dr. Sullivan couldn't reach them through the storm-blocked roads. "You were magnificent," Dawson told Nora afterward as she nursed their son beside the fire, Hope sleeping peacefully in her own small bed nearby. "I've never been so scared or so proud in my life. We did it together," she reminded him, "as we do everything." The years flowed by like the creek through their valley, sometimes rushing with excitement, sometimes meandering peacefully, but always moving forward, always nurturing what grew along its banks. Hope and William were joined by another sister, Elizabeth Martha, called Libby by her adoring siblings. The Reed Ranch prospered, becoming known throughout the territory for its quality stock and well-managed operation. Nora eventually returned to teaching part-time, holding classes for her own children and those of neighboring ranches 3 days a week in a small schoolhouse Dawson built near their home. Her reputation as an educator remained such that families would travel considerable distances for her instruction. Dawson's past remained safely buried. The man he had been before Silver Creek existed now only in private conversations with Nora and in the occasional nightmare that still visited him on stormy nights. Those episodes grew rarer as the years passed, as peace and purpose filled his days. On their 10th wedding anniversary, they returned to the plateau where Dawson had proposed. The view had changed somewhat, their ranch now visible in the valley below, smoke rising from the chimney of the home they had built together. Their children remained at the house with Martha Richardson, who doted on them as if they were her own grandchildren. 10 years, Nora mused, leaning against Dawson's shoulder as they sat on the same blanket they'd used a decade earlier. Sometimes it feels like yesterday that we met on that stagecoach road. Other times it seems like I've known you all my life. Best 10 years of my life, Dawson said, his arm tightening around her. At 42, his hair was beginning to silver at the temples, and lines of experience etched his face, but his eyes were still the same direct, honest, filled with love when they looked at her. No regrets, she asked. About choosing the harder road all those years ago. He turned to face her fully. At 34, Nora was more beautiful to him than ever, her face showing the character that comes from a life well lived, her body bearing the noble marks of motherhood, her eyes still bright with intelligence and warmth. Not one, he said with absolute certainty. That day when I saw the stagecoach stop, when I heard the shots, I could have ridden on. Taken the north trail, the easier path, but something made me go toward the trouble, not away from it. He touched her cheek gently. And that something led me to you, to our children, to everything that matters in my life. Nora leaned into his touch. I'm glad you're the kind of man who chooses the harder road when it's the right one. And I'm grateful every day that you're the kind of woman brave enough to walk it with me. As the sun began its descent toward the western mountains, painting the sky in the same colors it had on the day they'd met, Dawson and Nora Reed held each other close. The path behind them hadn't always been easy, and the one ahead would surely bring its own challenges. But they would face whatever came together, step by step, day by day, walking the road they had chosen. The road that had led them to each other and to the life they had built with love, courage, and unwavering commitment. In the valley below, lights began to appear in the windows of their home, beckoning them back to their children, to the heart of the life they had created. Hand in hand, they rose to answer that call, grateful for the harder road that had brought them safely home.